Hi, Sterling.
Hey, Katie.
Hey, thanks so much for being on the call. Uh, just again, congratulations. We're actually, while we recording this yesterday, which for all our viewers' time, maybe about a week ago, round one of your campaign has been officially funded and closed and will now be in the process of distribution. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, but before we even get into the details of what campaign are we talking about, I certainly want to introduce you. I normally do kind of like a deep dive on the internet between LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and everything else on our creators. So I'll give a brief intro to Sterling Baird. Uh, Sterling is a PhD candidate and research assistant at the University of Utah within the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. His work has been cited in over 38 publications and has authored 32 research papers, all ranging within the subjects of grain boundaries, material processing, microstructure, and basically the gist of today's campaign, or what we're talking about within this video, self-driving laboratories. Does that all seem about right? And did I forget anything to shout out?
No, that's great. Maybe just a couple extras. It's been a long journey. My wife and my daughter have been very supportive, and had some amazing mentors and advisors over the years. Dr. Robert Davis for my undergraduate, uh, Dr. Oliver Johnson for my master's program, and then currently Dr. Taylor Sparks, who's advising me for my PhD right now.
Awesome. And we'll actually talk about Dr. Sparks a little bit more because he is one of the teammates within this campaign, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
Rad. All right. Well, we'll talk about Dr. Sparks in a moment. But again, just a quick review or briefer for all of our viewers. GroupGets is an online platform for businesses, makers, educators, and researchers to save money and access the latest technologies by leveraging the power of group buying. So, quick blast about us. But again, one of the devices that is or has been campaigning and will be campaigning again for round two is, give me a second, let me work my mouth, Closed Loop Spectroscopy Lab Kit. Did I do it? Yes. By Sterling and his teammate Taylor Sparks, who is the associate professor, like Sterling said, associate professor of materials science and engineering at the University of Utah. Like I mentioned, the campaign has been fully backed. We will be going into round two, so more details will be following soon after this video. But I originally had a limited run of 100 units, and it was available for $75 at the time. So we'll see when we go into this what we'll do next. But I think to kick off the first question for you, Sterling, is who makes up the Autonomous Research Labs team, and what is the mission of this collaboration?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different scopes. In the inner circle, there's me and there's Dr. Taylor Sparks, where we've done a lot with using these machine learning models to predict new materials and try to test them out in the lab and validate those experiments. And what we're looking to get into more and using this demo and connections with sort of the broader community to kind of dive in really are these self-driving laboratories, this idea of bringing AI and robotics and other automation tools together in a way to accelerate our discovery of new knowledge as well as new materials that can be used for energy applications like batteries, solar cells, thermoelectrics, as well as different chemical engineering processing, structural materials, essentially all the materials that make up our everyday products and use cases. This is all part of a kind of broader community in the Acceleration Consortium. There's been a lot of support and buy-in from members of the Acceleration Consortium that's dedicated to that vision of combining AI with robotics and material science to discover new materials.
Got it. And yeah, and to your point, I mean, with self-driving laboratories and this collaboration between AI and machine and robotics, as complex as within each individual sort of science within itself, and then combining it all together, this might just be a very vapid question, but what, in your opinion, is the most challenging aspect of establishing an SDL?
That's a great question. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are much more qualified to answer that than myself. But if I were to take a stab at it, it's that uh, you can spend a year working on a self-driving laboratory, collect your data in 3 days, and there's this question of uh, was that startup cost of setting it up worth the acceleration time that you actually get in running the experiments? And so I think there's some big challenges there with making these systems modular and reconfigurable, so that if you did spend a year startup cost for the first one that you make, that you spend a much shorter time for the second one you make in the different iterations, and also looking to generate data sets, generate documentation, examples, some other value added components along with it. And then there's also the issue of maybe you're going to get some kind of silly answers. If it turns up the nozzle power too high and it just blows the sample away, your algorithms have to be able to handle and recognize that, or you need to be well integrated with the optimization routine so that you can identify when things go wrong. Um, so those are kind of two main areas where there's a big challenge, and they're kind of related there, where the person really needs to be involved in the process, using it as kind of these assistive tools, but make sure that the state-of-the-art tools are being brought in order to get that acceleration factor for the research discovery.
Certainly. Okay, and that makes sense. And especially like as we are like again, like we're seeing AI become kind of like this huge like not only hashtag for the kids, but just a huge topic of discussion in terms of like even like the morality of it or even like the use of it. What I can see, or at least kind of like what I can summarize from what you were describing was what you give it is what you get.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And that, to your point, can be very costly, which is why, maybe this is the leading up to the campaign, why you guys created it, if I'm not mistaken. Perfect. But you know what, before we even like get into the depths of what you're going to need to describe for me and the rest of our viewers, I have to ask, because it is on your GitHub, which again has become very well known and kind of even like shouted out the other day on Twitter for how many commits and how much work you've done on the GitHub community. So congratulations again. That's really cool to see how much you've done. Within the description, or at least within the bio page of your GitHub, it says you like to breakdance. Please divulge.
Sure. So I'm getting back into the old hobby of mine that I did about a decade ago really avidly. So in high school, I got started breakdancing. My friends were breakdancers, joined the hip hop club. I kept going with that into college, joined the breakdance club at Brigham University. And from there, I became president of the breakdance club for a little bit. We joined BYU's Best Dance Crew in a competition with, I think, about 15 other dance crews that came and performed, and we took first place in it. A lot of really talented people, amazing friends, and so that's been a big part of me. Kind of my main hobby, or at least. And when I started really getting into research, the time I spent breakdancing and doing tricking and parkour and all of that lessened quite a bit, and I started spending a lot more time in the scientific research side of things. And just recently, I've been really feeling the need to get back into that. So I've been trying to, several times a week, just get out, find a place, do some breakdancing, and it's a lot of fun.
That's really rad. I love it. And it's funny because like you mentioned, it's like kind of like you had to focus more on your research, and of course, like becoming a PhD candidate is going to be taking, already like 27 hours of your time and 9 days of your week anyway. But it's really cool to hear that, you're able to branch out and do more of your passions as well. So that's really cool. Had to ask. But now we'll talk more about the specifics of the campaign, which again, we will be hosting a round 2 to follow the make of this video. We'll be, again, posting it on our Twitter, Instagram, blasted within our next email coming this month. So without further ado, what was the purpose of creating your latest project, the Closed Spectroscopy Lab?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a huge startup cost involved with making one of these self-driving laboratories. If you go to some national labs where they have these incredibly expensive light sources, synchrotrons, for example, there is a lot of automation occurring there, but the capital is immense, and the skills and expertise required are also very high. So there's this large barrier to entry for students, even for researchers and professors. In order to break into this field, generally, you need a grant specific for this. Lots of grant money has already been spent on existing equipment that isn't very amenable to automation or the autonomous laboratory setup. And so a big reason for this is to help lessen that barrier. And there's also some really great teaching examples out there. This one takes it to an even lower cost, a simpler task, and really reduces it to in coding terms, a minimal working example or a hello world for these autonomous laboratories. There's lots of these hello world projects in electronics with microcontrollers, and this essentially just takes several different hello world style topics and projects and pulls them all together with a heavy emphasis on materials science, autonomous research, chemistry, and some of those fields. So designing it and looking at what that might look like in a very small, contained scale that could be used in a classroom, that could be used for prototyping, that you can deploy code on in a very low cost and low risk setting.
Certainly. And yeah, that actually answers a question that I had regarding just again, hello world is such a basic, yep, welcome to this field of engineering, programming, whatever have you. And you just described the applications that you have, that you guys have envisioned for this project. So what applications has this already been used in? Again, this is very applicable within this academic setting, introducing students within material sciences or within the programming world just to kind of go into this AI SDL environment. So has there been any recent applications or applications that you might have used this project for recently?
So this project very new. I think it was within this last 6 months that the idea kind of even came about, and it's quickly followed a rapid development cycle. During this upcoming semester, the spring semester, a number of professors at different universities have expressed interest in using this in their classrooms for their classes that they're teaching. Several of them, I think, for the first time on autonomous scientific discovery. And so bringing this in as a very kind of easy to parse, easy to swallow demo to bring in teaching about some things. One of the big ones that I think is worth noting is teaching the hello world of optimization algorithms. There's if you Google grid search versus random search versus Bayesian optimization, they'll come up with a lot of machine learning heavy things where you're optimizing machine learning algorithms. But to bring that a little bit more to the material sciences, or at least physical experiments, what we do in this demo is we take the red, green, and blue LED powers, and we take a light sensor to measure the intensities at different color wavelengths, and we optimize the red, green, and blue to match our target color spectrum. And so that becomes the optimization task. And we can run a grid search where we kind of uniformly sample points along each dimension in the search space. We can do random search where we randomly pick points, red, green, and blue values. And then we can use a more informed optimization algorithm, something called Bayesian optimization, to much more efficiently in many fewer iterations, reach our target value. So that's a nice hello world example that actually brings in physical experimentation. You have to send commands to the hardware, you have to read the sensor data and plug it into the optimization algorithm. Things might go wrong, as it usually does with hardware, but it brings it a little bit more into the field of the physical sciences rather than kind of like the pure machine learning research.
Certainly. And, to that point, you have already documented really well on your GitHub and especially within our the campaign page as well on like how to get started. But what is the best way for a user of this kit to get started? So just to have it on video here too.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So let's say the kit arrives. It might be pre-assembled. It might not be, depending on if you selected that option. But first, you get the kit to the point where it's fully assembled. You've got the sensor attached and facing the LED, and you run the starting introductory notebook, a Jupyter notebook, basically this notebook that lets you run Python commands in it. And if you can get that working, where you're sending commands to your hardware and reading the sensor data back, that's sort of the first, that's what we envision as like the first win that you feel of like, okay, I can, run my first autonomous drive, so to speak, in this self-driving lab with the experiment. And then from there, there are many tutorial notebooks that cover more advanced optimization topics, things with databases, and the list goes on. And so that's kind of the flow that I'd see some people taking. And then also things that we might not even envision, but ideas that you have for how to modify it, how to extend it, and we'd love to get contributions in terms of ideas, in terms of code, all of that to the project.
Yeah, and that'd be awesome. And again, I will be including links within this video. So links to, of course, the GitHub itself, links within the resources page that Sterling and Dr. Sparks has listed within the campaign page. And yeah, again, tweeting at GroupGets, which would then I'll just retweet to Sterling make sure that if there are any other explorations, then that's certainly something that we'd love to cover within our own blog or within future experiments as well. So that is certainly a shout out or a call out to you guys once you guys get this kit. If you have not already ordered, round 1 will be distributed fairly soon, but we will be launching round 2, which we'll talk about in a moment. One of the things that I found in my research before we got on this call was I did not read 32 of your papers. I'm sorry. Can't do it, won't do it. Yeah, I can even barely kind of wrap my head around AI, at least in the very, it took a lot for me just to even get to AI. But within your paper, quote, the title, "What is a minimal working example for a materials acceleration program?" I'll put that link within the paper below as well. You mentioned that this project's unique approach is that there are no robotic movements. What is the main reason behind that decision? And what is kind of again, what is the main decision behind that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to capture the key principles of a self-driving laboratory in that minimal fashion, as soon as you involve something with robotic movement, generally you're either looking at several $100s for the entry point of that, or you can keep it in this very low cost, low budget thing, but you have dramatically more time in troubleshooting, things not working, things breaking, setup time, and so forth. And so there's this trade-off between the cost of the demo and the time it takes to set the demo up. And one of the ideas I had in mind was to make something that was less than $100 and could be set up in less than an hour. And so with that, I started this idea of using LEDs instead of something robotic, moving solid materials or liquid materials, doing that kind of transfer. To me, that seemed like a way that you could still retain a lot of those key principles, but make it more likely for someone to have success when they're trying it. In other words, it was hard to think of something simpler than blinking LEDs, and that was kind of the beauty of the project and the idea, is that you could blink LEDs, but capture some of the key principles in these multi-million-dollar setups that people have been learning and experience over years of work and years of sweat and labor, and trying to kind of condense that down into something that could be taught in a classroom or someone could use for prototyping before they write a grant proposal, for example. So.
Yes, I think you've basically hit the nail on the head for like just a bunch of researchers and students and educators, where it's just like, would love to have something that's not, kind of cost or trying to get the grant for like, $10,000 or more for this. So that certainly makes sense to me.
Something I think you mentioned too is that our plan is to extend it into robotics, to take the demo and create more advanced versions that capture some more difficult concepts, but using this as kind of the entry point for that. So it's in the timeline, but it was very specific for this project, the minimal working example that we could think of to leave out the robotic.
Certainly. No, and that makes sense, and I sincerely hope that, GroupGets will be a part of that, but we certainly wish you best of luck in that process, in that transition. That'd be cool. So again, speaking to the teaching and prototyping platform, I forgot to kind of bring this up in the first place, but this was a Hackster.io top 10 finalist for 2022. And so I have to kind of transition us to this next question of, in short, this campaign, and this is grabbing from the campaign's title, is, quote, a teaching and prototyping platform for autonomous scientific discovery. Already simple sounding from the video that we've just had, this interview that we've been having, it is not. It became a top 10 finalist for the Hackaday Prize Save the World Wildcard contest. So again, congratulations to you and Dr. Sparks on achieving that. Out of 370 other projects that were submitted for this category, how did this project, again, the Closed Spectroscopy Lab, how did it beat out over 370 other projects that were focused in sustainability, resiliency, and circularity? That was the Hackaday qualifications for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a couple of things I can point out here. One would be that the simplicity is by design, and there's some, I guess there's a lot of work involved in making simple designs that are meant to be user-friendly, and there are a lot of kind of competing objectives. And I try to make sure to document all of that. So there's there's quite the history of even discussion and documentation and bringing in ideas from people in the community that have affected a lot of the design decisions in what particular components made it in here, what things could be let go of, what things were very much required. And so on one hand, I think there's that level of documentation, the reproducibility, that was a big part that made it stand out. And then this other part that it really is targeting some incredibly real world applications. You've got all sorts of groups that are focused on zero carbon materials, reducing the carbon footprint from a materials standpoint, looking at clean energy being a big part of that as well. And so it's kind of this tiny demo with really big goals and a big vision of what it can bring. And I think it does a good job of being more approachable, kind of a more approachable entry there. So some fantastic projects on there, and I was excited and ecstatic to get it placed as one of the finalists in the Hackaday Wildcard competition. So.
Yeah, no, and it's a pretty stringent the Hackaday team really like deep dive into like, okay, like what is the background of this project and like how can this be, again, to your point, accessible to all of the users and makers that are within their community, much less, within the maker community in general. So again, that's congratulations. And, to that point, we mentioned earlier that, the campaign, and again, round 2 will be launching soon. After maybe I turn off this call, I'll just go press the, make round 2 button really quick. But the campaign that offers a pre-assembly as an option, and again, bringing back into accessibility, what would be a benefit of adding this feature of just having it already pre-assembled for a backer?
Sure. Really what it does is it reduces the setup time even further, where it's going to come pre-wired. It's going to come having been kind of vetted, make sure that everything's working okay. And the main appeal for that, I think, should be reducing that, again, on that trade-off, paying just a little bit extra to reduce the setup time a little bit more. So it's really up to the user, like, is there something to be gained from having all the kind of raw components and putting it together yourself? I think so. But for some people, that might not be the focus. And especially if there are, let's say a professor wants to buy a kit of 10 of these for a class, then that trade-off becomes a little bit more significant when you multiply the setup time times 10. And so that might be an appealing use case where if you're going to focus a lot on the optimization algorithms with the students, that's kind of the expectation of what the students are bringing in. Maybe you could have the students take some time to build it. Maybe there's not really that time in the course schedule, so there's some trade-offs there that just kind of personal choice. And it's I think that there's also a lot to be said for just building it yourself. So it's really just kind of up to you.
Got it. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And especially like I believe in our last campaign, I think everyone except one person had ordered it to be pre-assembled. So that person just really wants to get their hands dirty and just kind of see where it goes. So good luck to them. But it should be very easy. Like you mentioned, at least setup should take at least about an hour or so, which granted, given how much nerds within the maker community likes to do this, maybe that's just like a nice little exercise before you get started within the real core of the project. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today. And basically what I want to make sure that we highlight is you can find Sterling on his GitHub, which again has been praised for all the commits that he's been making, and especially for the in-depth detail that he's provided for this campaign. So again, I will provide the links within the bottom of this video description and as well within our blog page. You can also find him on Twitter. That's how I think we met, technically, so that's cool. So at Sterling Baird 1. And is there any other resources I should pull up? I know, I'm going to, shout out actually to, if you want to do this, Dr. Sparks's Materialism podcast. Is there, what's that all about, actually?
Oh, great question. So they dig into the history of materials discoveries. They interview companies and talk about some of their cutting edge research. And really it was brought about by kind of a lack of a good materials science podcast being out there. And they said, hey, let's jump on this, let's try it out. And so he and Andrew Falkowski, co-hosts of the Materialism podcast, now have it's fairly popular. It's kind of funny. I'll be traveling to these different conferences and I'll mention my advisor's name and they'll say, "Oh, I listened to his podcast." So it's it's a fun one. You can learn a lot about material science by listening to them. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, there's forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think there's still over 100 episodes that he has published, probably even more, to be honest with you.
It's about 100, yeah.
Okay, well, see, then, there's 32 research papers by you, 100 episodes by him, and I was like, I'm going to try to condense this as good as I can. This is what I got. So yeah, if you viewers again have not seen or have heard of the Materialism podcast, I will provide the link within the description below. You can tune in to Dr. Sparks's conversations, like Sterling had mentioned. I will again, if you can like TLDR the research paper that we just talked about during this conversation, perfect. Then I will be all on board for that. Again, we will also be linking to the the original Hackaday project that Sterling had submitted, the GitHub source code, and the Google Colab notebook tutorials, again, to help you as a backer, and even if like you're curious and seeing like, what is this all about before you back, certainly jump on those resources. And again, Sterling and his team has also made the awesome video of like basically how to get started. So it's, again, if you want to like tangle your hands within the hour, or if you just want to check it out yourself on the video, we'll be linking to that. Am I missing any other links at this point?
I don't think by way of links. Something that I do want to say, if you're kind of on the fence about whether to order the parts yourself, try to build one of these, try to have one. This is kind of the beginning of what I'm picturing as a big wave, and so I think jumping onto it early, getting that in hand, I'm hoping to get examples of like, some of the mind-blowing state-of-the-art optimization algorithms operating on the system, bring in MongoDB database backends and Internet of Things style communication, all of that, a lot of which is already implemented and going further, is that this can be kind of kind of like the central hub of like, okay, let's make some hackathons, let's build these tools, these software tools, these other hardware additions, to really flesh out what does the lab of the future look like? What are the key principles that need to be retained there? So something that might help sway one way or the other. There's a lot of really good content coming later, and you can wait till later and get it then too. That would be just fine.
For sure. No, and yeah, to your point, again, round 1 has been funded and will be distributed soon. Round 2 will be launching maybe as soon as I get done with this interview. So we'll see where that goes. Thank you so much for your time, Sterling, and I really appreciate you answering all of our questions. And again, if there are any other further questions regarding this campaign, you are welcome to either tweet at us at GroupGets or tweet at Sterling. Or if you want to sign up and create a GroupGets account, if you haven't already, you can do so and then leave a question or comment within the campaign page itself, again, once I launch it. Again, thank you so much, Sterling. Really appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you, Katie.